UDC.
Hi, everyone. The systems integration group has been busy putting together this group of custom add-ins that can be installed with ArcGIS Pro. This extends the out-of-the-box functionality of Pro. We were doing this as part of the different projects that UDC has going on, but these add-ins and our toolkit as a whole is available to everyone to use if you have a need for it. As you can see in the screenshot down below, we call it our UDC toolkit, and it's kind of a combination of some of the out-of-the-box functionality in Pro and all of our custom functionality that we've added in. So on the left side of the UDC toolkit, once you've installed it, you're going to see some of the out-of-the-box functionality that we've put onto our ribbon, just so that you don't have to flip back and forth between the different tabs in Pro. It includes the navigation tools, the selection tools, the save functionality for editing, and validating network topology. And then to the right of the out-of-the-box functionality is where all of our custom add-ins are. So the first one you'll see is lock management, and I'm just going to go through a really high-level description of what each one of these does. So lock management allows the user to specify a database connection and an ArcGIS server, and it will essentially go through all the services in ArcGIS server, and it will either stop or start, depending on what you tell it to do, each service that uses that database connection. So that database and those login parameters, that's what it's going to use to stop all the services. The reason for this is if you need an exclusive lock on a database and you want to make changes to the schema, then you need to disconnect everyone from the database. And often what was happening with ArcGIS Server is as soon as you disconnect the users from ArcGIS Server, it would just automatically reconnect to the database, so you could never really get that exclusive lock. So this will go through and stop all those services. You can make your changes, and then it will start them back up. At the bottom of the add-in, it also will show you connected users and give you the option to disconnect all users. So next we have our alter schema custom add-in. This allows you to specify a database connection and go through and change or mark all of the objects that you want to move from one schema in your SDE database to another. So for example, you may have some objects in the SDE schema and you want to move it to a new custom schema called GIS. So you would select these objects in the schema that you want to move to GIS, and then you would specify an SDE connection file that connects to the database with the GIS schema. And then what it's going to do when you click execute is every object that you've selected, it's going to make a copy of it in the new schema, and it's going to delete the old object. So you will essentially or effectively be left with the same object and data, but in the new schema, just without any history related to it. We have our XY offset. This allows you to offset features in the X, Y, and or Z direction. So in this case, we've specified a utility network and we're specifying an asset type. So in this screenshot, you can see the customer meters. We want to move all of those features, and you can specify criteria too, like attribute criteria, to just grab certain features from the customer meter asset types. And then you can choose whether you want to move the features relatively or absolutely. And you can choose whether you want to modify the X, Y, and or Z coordinates, and then you specify how much you want to move them and in what direction. We have our remodel tool. So this one allows a user to select a group of features that are connected in the map, and that kind of forms your template. So you can see in this screenshot on the left side, we have our template. It's an excess flow valve connected to a pipe, which is connected to another junction and maybe another device. And what this will now do, once you have defined your template, is it will search through your database and it will find everywhere where this collection of features exist connected in this way. So like a use case for this would be if you have these pipes that are marked as phantom, maybe they're not really a pipe, but they're representing something else. This would give you an opportunity to go through all of your database and modify these groups of features to reflect what is actually in the field. And so once you've selected this template and it goes through and it creates a list of everywhere where this exists in the database, you can define actions that you want to take on each one of these feature groups. So you could say, I want to delete this pipe, or I want to create an assembly where the excess flow valve is, or I want to create a feature association from the excess flow valve to the junction or to another device. So, and it will take all of these actions that you've defined and it will apply them to every feature group that it has found. You can apply it discriminatively, so you can just say, I want to apply it just to these certain feature groups, or you can apply it to all of the feature groups. And you can also save all of your configuration for these add-ins in a JSON file so that you can load it up later and you don't have to type all this in every single time. So the next add-ins we're going to talk about are very specific to utility network. The ones previously, while we did base them on utility network use cases, they could be technically used outside the utility network. So this first one is the utility network properties. So we noticed in the out-of-the-box Pro functionality that the utility network properties UI, when you're just browsing through it, sometimes it can be a little clunky and difficult to navigate. So we just wanted to give a slightly more easy to use user interface. So with this add-in, when you go to the properties of a layer, you'll see all the utility network properties broken out, like asset groups, asset types, terminal configurations, etc. And they're all in their own grids, and the grids can be searched and filtered and sorted, and they can also be exported into Excel if you want to do analysis over there as well. We have an asset package importer add-in. There are a lot of steps that you have to take in the geoprocessors to go from an asset package to a published utility network. And this kind of combines them all together. So you don't need to know the steps and you don't need to monitor each individual step. So you provide all the inputs, and what it's going to do is create a database user for your utility network. It's going to create the utility network and stage it, and it's going to apply the asset package to it. It's going to version the data, create a map with all the data, publish that to Portal, and really just get everything going for you. It's going to watch those individual geoprocessor steps, and if there are any errors that it can handle, and then repeat the geoprocessor step and keep things moving, it will do that. We have our connector add-in. This goes through all of our utility network data, and it tries to find where there are features that look like they're trying to be connected, but we have no connectivity rules for them. Those are errors when you go to validate your network topology. So we can identify those missing rules and provide them for the user in a text file that can be imported into the utility network. That will then create all of those missing connectivity rules and fix all of the errors in your utility network. Similarly, we have a missing junctions add-in. This will go through all of your utility network data and find out where you have junctions that are missing that need to be there to support the validity of the connectivity. And so in this case, it's going through finding where all these junctions are missing, and it can automatically create those for you, and you can specify what asset group and type you want it to create the junctions as. You can specify attributes that will go automatically on the new junctions. You can tell it to run it for the whole database or the current extent and different things like that. It's pretty flexible. We have a terminal configs add-in. So this basically goes through all of your utility network data, and it finds where you need to specify terminal options or terminals that are going to be used for the connectivity of the features. And so you can see in this screenshot, when it finds a place where you need to specify terminals, it's going to pop up a little user interface for you to specify the terminals to use. And in addition to that, it tries to automate setting these terminals in similar circumstances. So when it encounters a similar circumstance as the one that you're providing the information for right now, you can specify conditions that need to be met to apply these same terminals down the road. So you can say, well, if attribute 1 equals this value and attribute 2 equals this value, and it's the similar assets, then just go ahead and apply these terminals because that's what I would have chosen anyway if you had prompted me for those values. And we have import subnetwork controllers add-in. In this add-in, you specify a utility network, and you specify a CSV file that contains all of your subnetwork controllers, and it will go through and it can create the subnetwork controllers automatically for you. So that's a good way to get the subnetwork controllers going. We have a validate all dirty areas add-in. The reason for this add-in is sometimes when you validate your network topology, if you have a large enough database and a large enough set of errors and everything, it could possibly time out every time you want to validate that topology. So what this does is it goes through each of your dirty areas, just the small dirty areas, one at a time, so that it can validate each one individually. It's a very short process then for each one, so it's not timing out. And by the time it's done all of them, you've effectively validated all of your network topology, and hopefully you haven't timed out. And we have an attribute role exporter. So this can export attribute roles off of objects and allow you to import those attribute roles onto other objects. This is good if you want to, for example, promote attribute roles from one environment to another. Say you have a development environment with a lot of objects that you've created attribute roles on, and you want to push all those attribute roles to a testing environment. You can specify your source geodatabase here that has all of your attribute roles, and then it's going to provide you a list of all the objects, and you can actually interrogate what attribute roles are on each object. And you basically select all the objects who have attribute roles that you want to push to another environment. And then you specify your target geodatabase, which is your target environment, and it will just automatically export and import those attribute roles into your target geodatabase so you don't have to retype all of those attribute roles. Similarly, we have the attribute role templates add-in. So what this allows you to do is if you have an attribute role that you find yourself putting on a lot of different feature classes and fields, and maybe you just make very small modifications to the attribute role every time you try to apply it, you can actually set up a template where you define inputs, and those inputs can modify the attribute role before it is applied to a field. So a good example of this would be, let's say every time you move a feature, you want an attribute on that feature called town name to be automatically updated with the town that the feature exists in. And you have a boundaries feature class that tells you all of the town names. So you can write this attribute rule that's going to find which boundary that feature exists in, and then it's going to look for the town name on the boundary and automatically insert that into the town name attribute for the feature. So this would be a common thing you would want to do on all of your feature classes. And for different fields, maybe you have like a town name and a county name, or a state name or whatever. And so they're all very similar, but they're all slightly different. So you can create this attribute rule template, and you can have the user each time input the target feature class that's going to be updated when a feature is moved, the attribute you want to be updated. So for example, town name, the boundaries feature class you want to use to get that town name. And then every time you apply this to a new field in a new feature class, rather than rewriting that attribute rule or copying and pasting it and tweaking it with all these different values, it will just automatically modify the attribute rule for you based on your inputs and apply it to the field. And finally, we have our network errors add-in. So similar to the utility network properties UI out of the box in Pro, the network errors were just kind of clunky to deal with. If you wanted to look at all of your network errors, you had to click on the error in the table, right-click on it and choose pop-up, and then you would get a pop-up and it would show you the error message. So we've just kind of made a new grid that shows all those errors complete with their error descriptions and their error codes. And you can search and filter through these things, and you can export it to Excel for analysis as well if you just want to get out of the Pro environment and do something over there.
UDC.